Steve Jobs. I thought this would interest you, Alan. It was suggested by Matthew Hammond. Sent me a note. I get notes. I get DMs on X. And this is a short clip of Steve Jobs on the art of storytelling. And I really think it really explains what Disney lost when they fired John Lasseter. I'm going to bring this up, and I think this would interest you a lot, Alan. Mm. That's why I want to show this. Let's look at this clip. I may pause it, or if you want me to pause it, I'll pause, but let's take a look at this. Steve Jobs, obviously brilliant, and certainly understood the value of telling a great story. He kind of, in a way, crafted a story about Apple that is, well, legendary. Let's look at this.
In a live action movie, the director goes out and shoots lots of film, typically between 10 and 100 times more footage than will end up on the screen. And then they take it all into the editing room and they build their movie in the editing room. And that's why, sometimes you see a movie and you go, that stunk. Didn't they know it? Well, the answer is yes, they did, but they knew it too late. They knew it in the editing room and they go, oh, Jesus. And by the time they knew it, the actors were gone, the sets were down, they ran out of money, and they had what they had and they made the best movie they could. So in animation, it is so expensive that you cannot afford to animate more than a few percent more than is going to end up on the screen. You could never afford to animate 10 times more than is going to end up on the screen. So how do you do it? Well, Walt Disney himself solved this problem decades ago. And the way he solved it was he said, we have to edit our film before we make it, not after. Well, how do you edit a film before you make it? Well, you get your story team together and you do storyboards. You do these little pictures for every key scene, but that wasn't enough. Then what he did was he actually photographed them on film. He filmed each picture, of which there are, thousands. And then he got he got scratch voices, people around the studio to do the voices, and he'd even put in some scratch music. And then he could watch his movie. And we still do that today. We use video, we were more sophisticated at it, but basically we build our movie before we make it out of these story sketches, and we video them and we put scratch music and scratch voices so we can watch our movie. And invariably, what you think is going to work crashes and burns when you see it in the reels. And you iterate on these reels thousands of times. And only when it works in the reels do you then go animate it and actually produce it. And so, in Hollywood, one of the most popular sayings is...
I was going to say, George Lucas did this too. For all the action scenes, at least in the OT, they would do what they called animatics. And they would shoot drawings of X-Wings or AT-ATs. They would basically make the action scene in drawings and in rough video before they even spent money to build and animate the models. So we'll continue this. It's about a minute more. It's worth seeing.
The story is king. But it turns out it really isn't. Because when push comes to shove, when a movie's in production and there's a lot of mouths to feed and they're waiting for stuff to make and the story's not working, almost everybody says, well, we just have to make the movie. And one of the things that I'm proudest of Pixar of is we have a story crisis on every movie and production's rolling and there's mouths to feed and something's just not working. And we stop. We stop and we fix the story. Because John Lasseter, who's one of the founders of Pixar, he really instilled a culture of story, story, story. And even though Pixar is the most technologically advanced studio in the world, John has a saying that's really stuck, which is no amount of technology will turn a bad story into a good story. So that's, I think, one of the reasons why we've been so fortunate is that we get to look at our movies before we really make them and perfect them in reels and then go make them.
Alan, I mean, obviously you've reported on the failure of Disney. We talked quite a bit about Elio. What do you think about what Steve Jobs had to say?
Well, I mean, the idea that you don't make the movie up as you go along, that's wrong. I think we talked about we talk about it here ad nauseum. Fix it and prep. Preparation is everything. The reason the first Dune worked out so well, came in around budget, was because they prepared, they planned. I watching that made me think of one thing, is that the wrong people are running the studios right now.
Yes, that's precise. Yeah, when you got someone like Steve Jobs,
Who's
who,
not a
you know,
who's a tech guy.
he's a tech guy, but he understands story. He supports. Look, he didn't write a movie, Steve Jobs, but he knew what it took because he was basically co-opting Disney's process. You understand intimately that because you went to the Walt Disney Museum. You can talk about this in your files and all that stuff.
Right. But yeah, I mean, he's right. This is back in the day when Disney was doing, I assume this is the early days of Pixar he's talking about, but Disney at that point was still doing hand-drawn animation, which is time-consuming. It's a 3-year process. And I know of maybe 2 films that were shut down midway through and had to be redone. Emperor's New Groove is probably the classic example. Oh, Aladdin was the other one, where someone, I guess it was Michael Eisner, who was in charge, then just realized, look, it's a bad movie, start over. And
right.
We just can't, we have no discipline to do that anymore.
Go watch any videos you can find about the making of the first Toy Story. Mm-hmm. They didn't even know it would be a hit or not, but they shut production down and retooled the entire. It was a completely different movie.
Yeah. Woody was a bad guy.
Yeah,
Woody was a much more evil character in the first one.
And Lasseter tells a story about he wasn't sure the movie would. They didn't know. They made the movie in kind of a vacuum of their own making. He was in the airport and saw a little kid with a Woody doll, and he thought, okay, maybe we will resonate with people. So I wish those values, those processes have been preserved, because it seems like there's been, as you reported in the D files, an upheaval of the processes and an overthrowing of the veterans that really know how to do this. And it's resulted in modern Disney, which is crap. The best performing financially things from Disney are remakes. Lilo and Stitch, come on. That's not, you can't be proud of that.
69.
Final thoughts, Alan. We'll go to comments.
Yeah, because studios are more concerned now about producing content, making a movie, as opposed to telling good stories. The other thing is, everything Steve Jobs said, he made the implication that it applied only to animation, and that's just not true. This applies to live action movies, to movies in general. You've got to have a script planned out long beforehand. You got to know the story you're getting into before you start making that story. You mentioned George Lucas. He used animatics. You could still do the same thing with regular movies. You have a script. You can board out however your camera angles are going to be. There's no reason why this is not there. There's no reason why this process should not be the process for every movie ever made from now on.